everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 16 of the Big at the Back podcast. I'm here once again with Matt. Matt, how are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks. It's a sunny Wednesday morning at the moment. I'm currently distracted. If it seems though distracted, I am, because England are currently playing in the T20 World Cup. So I've got that on my phone just below here. So if it does seem as though I'm distracted, I can't be missing out on an England game. It's a must-win game as well. If we lose this, we're out. So unfortunately, needs must. I'll try and blag my way through as much as possible. So if I sound even worse than usual, you know why. But yeah, other than that, I'm all good. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. I feel like you being slightly distracted might make you a little bit better. It's like when you're not if you try to do something at 100%, you'll often not be as good as if you were trying 80%. So I'm hoping it has that effect with you. How was your week? Let's talk about FPL first, because this is an FPL podcast and I do not want to speak about Liverpool anymore. So how was your week?
Overall, fairly decent week. So I took a 4-point hit in the end, made two changes, two transfers, and that was Salah and Edouard out for Miguel Almiron and Harry Kane. It's what we spoke about on the pod last week, and after the Champions League fixtures and no injuries, I made the switch. Sort of just about paid off, I think, in the end, but it didn't make up the 4-point balance. So, and with Kane having my vice captaincy and Haaland not playing, it could have been better, it could have been worse. But I mean, the back four were the ones that really paid off, or the back five were the ones that really paid off this week, plus Almiron. So Pope with a clean sheet and goal, Davis with his goal against Bournemouth for 7, Cancelo keeping a clean sheet, Trippier with 11 points. And the big one for me was Tyrick Mitchell, who just about came off the bench for me thanks to Anthony not playing against West Ham. So he came off as my second sub for 11 points. Thank God for Anthony picking up a knock. And then midfield, Martinelli picking up 8. It could have been so many more for him because Arsenal really put Sheffield United to the sword on Sunday afternoon. Foden with a 1-pointer because, of course, he starts every game in the Premier League until I transfer him in, and then he's benched 2 games in a row. Pep, I hate you. Andreas coming off the bench with 3 points, Almiron 12, and then the front two of Kane and Mitrovic, a point apiece. So Kane getting doubled up as he was my vice and Haaland not playing. So that brought me up to a total of 68, if you're counting. Obviously, the 4-point hit takes me down to 64, which is above average, but somehow still red arrows everywhere. So I feel like FPL is actually taking the piss out of me this season.
It's interesting because I'm on green arrows, but I got 67 points from the game week. Like you, I've got Mitchell and Trippier. I started Mitchell, so I feel like you got very, very jammy with getting his 11 points to catch up with me. And Robertson somehow getting 3 bonus points in that match. I've got no idea how, but ending on 7. Then across the middle, Martinelli and Salah, the big hitters. I feel like I had Saka this week, and it started really well. After 10 minutes, he got an assist for Martinelli. And then his replacement, after he gets injured, goes and gets 2 goals and an assist. I feel like I'm owed those Reece Nelson points. Like, as a Saka owner, those points should be coming to me. I mean, we'll get my lawyers involved, but I'm certain that's the case I'm going to win.
Yeah, I think you're dead right as well. And I feel the same about my bet because I needed Saka to have a shot on target as part of my bet. So those Reece Nelson shots should go down to Saka and I should get paid out.
I agree completely. I mean, we've got to take it up with the gods of FPL and Bet365. They may be the same person. Who knows?
I'll write a strongly worded email.
So that's where the majority of my points came from. Kane and Mitro up top, Andreas and Saka in the midfield. 2 free transfers going into this week. So it's time for me to, surprise, load up on Manchester City. So let's actually go through that first in terms of our transfer plans or rough transfer plans. I mean, with Saka getting the knock and the next game against Chelsea, I'm actually going to likely be dropping him and dropping Johnny from my defence in order to fund Cancelo and Bernardo Silva. I can't quite afford Phil Foden. I don't trust Jack Grealish to start. So I think Bernardo Silva is probably the next best affordable option. I don't really want to drop Salah because the last home game is against Southampton. And Tottenham aren't looking great. He could still do something, even though Liverpool are bloody terrible. Same with Kane against Liverpool. I really don't want to drop him when he could really go off against Liverpool at the moment. So that's my thinking right now. What are your transfer plans looking like for the week ahead?
So I've only got the one transfer in the bank, and I think I'm only going to use the one. Obviously, dependent on the midweek European fixtures. As always, we've got to wait and see how they play out. But at the moment, the one thought I'm having is obviously Anthony picking up that knock. And it would be a straight swap with their fixtures coming up. I'm thinking of Anthony to Rashford. I think Rashford looked very good against West Ham on Sunday. He is chipping in with a few more goals here and there. And he's a lot cheaper. So that would also free up money for potentially a big move going into that last week before the World Cup break. So that's where my thoughts are at the moment. I don't think there's anything else that particularly needs changing for me. Right now, I'm pretty happy with the overall balance of the side, as long as Phil Foden starts playing some more.
I think for these last couple of games as well before the World Cup, because, I mean, we've said it 100 times, but the World Cup happens from game week 16 or from after game week 16. We all get unlimited transfers, so that's almost a stop point in the season because we've all got a World Cup after that. I'm only really looking at teams with home games. So 2 home games left. And of those teams, you're looking at, let's see. So Man U have got 2 away games, for example, but City have got Fulham and Brentford at home. They're the obvious ones. Nottingham Forest have Brentford and Crystal Palace at home. Spurs have Liverpool and Leeds at home, and Wolves have Brighton and Arsenal, and West Ham have Crystal Palace and Leicester. I don't hate the idea of looking at a Jared Bowen or a Scamacca, looking at these last 2 games, particularly 2 home games for West Ham. So they're the teams I would be targeting. Man U have got 2 away games, but they're 2 quite nice away games against Villa and Fulham. Let's talk about the games then. And like last week, let's rip the Band-Aid off because Liverpool beat Leeds. I'll be honest, I was watching strictly on the main TV and just had this on my laptop on the side, so I was watching on the silent, but I just wish I wasn't. It was unbelievable how bad we've been, and you'd think there'd be some kind of response after the Forest game, but it's the same story as last week. Liverpool just look shattered, and the average age of our squad is the highest in the league, I think, with means that players aren't getting back from injury correctly or aren't getting back from injury okay. They're getting more knocks, more niggles, and the squad is just an absolute mess at the moment. We started the season with a load of injuries, and we've never really had a fully fit squad since the beginning. So I think the squad is just completely beaten, and I'm quite glad that it looks like half of them won't be going to the World Cup. So it means they'll actually get a rest for a month. What was your thoughts on the abject performance from Liverpool to start with?
Well, like you, I have my priorities straight, so I have strictly on the main TV and Liverpool game on the laptop. So kudos to you there. I feel like once you came back into the game and you got the equaliser fairly quickly on, like early on as well. The less said about Joe Gomez's back pass and not looking, the better. That was a shambles. Got back into the game fairly quickly. Took the goal well, Salah did. It was a good ball in from Robertson. But at that point, you felt like there was only ever going to be one winner. The way Leeds' confidence has been lately, obviously they've been really struggling. There's been a lot of pressure heaped on Jesse Marsch. A lot of people thought, probably myself included, that he wasn't even going to be in charge by the time this fixture came round. But I think I did say on last week's pod, actually, maybe this is exactly the fixture that they do need at the moment.
Yeah.
But then Meslier with 9 saves, like you did have chances. You made a couple of good saves as well in that. But there was no real test. Darwin had a couple of shots, a 1-on-1, which was saved, and then one which he picked up just outside the 18-yard box and curled towards the top corner, which was a good save. But you never really felt Leeds were out of the game either. Like there was one chance where Bamford was played in, and if he was in any sort of form, he would have taken the touch and buried it. Like if that was Bamford of not even necessarily our season, but the season before, where he was fit and firing, that would have been a goal. So they were always in the game. They were just sniffing out chances. But then right at the end, I'm thinking they're going to take it down into the corner. Then a little bit of play potentially could be defended a little bit better. It just drops to Somerville and he pokes it home. And he takes it fairly well. But I mean, I don't know what to say for Liverpool at the moment. I mean, I had Salah in obviously to come out. He got the goal, but I just don't feel. I know you're doubled up on Liverpool defenders, or at least you have been. Actually, it's our joint team that's doubled up on Liverpool defenders. So again, less said about that, the better. I just don't know what to do with them at the moment. Like if you've got them, good luck figuring it out, because I'm out of Liverpool now. And like we've constantly said, unless Diogo Jota comes back anytime soon, I don't see things changing particularly quickly. They need this World Cup break more than probably any team in the league at the moment.
Yeah, desperately so. Tottenham away is a very hard game, but it's really interesting. Liverpool are really turning up for the big games. In the Champions League, we've looked awesome. Against Man City, we look great. Against Scott Parker's Bournemouth, we look majestic. Big games.
The big ones, yeah.
But you get the sense Tottenham away, we could really do something, and that's where it's really frustrating. I have Salah and Robertson in my squad at the moment. I feel like I got away with it with both of them getting 7 points this week. My thinking is that I'll probably hold them just because I have other areas in the team to address. So I'll probably hold them for the last two, is where my head's at the moment. The captaincy debate really isn't there with Mo Salah at the moment, just because why would you go near that Liverpool side when I don't even think Salah's playing terribly. I just think the midfield is a huge problem. Fabinho has had maybe 1 or 2 games in this calendar year 2022 where he's looked like the player he was in 2021. He's been horrendous. Thiago, when he plays, looks good, but he can't do it all himself. Harvey Elliott's obviously absolutely knackered. The reality is we've been used to having the legs of Jordan Henderson in that midfield for the last decade, and they're just not there anymore. He's 32 going on 33. He just doesn't really have the legs to keep up. While he's still got the ability, he's just not got the stamina. And I think we're really, really missing that. It's really, really showing because we can't control and dominate games anymore. And without Diogo Jota in the side and without Luis Diaz in the side, we can't seem to cut through teams in the way that we were last season. So I think it's a real problem. I'm not having that centre-back pairing for Van Dijk as well as a challenge, because Joe Gomez, while being majestic against City, has been terrible for the last 2 games. So I'll hold the Liverpool players until the World Cup, but I certainly wouldn't be advising captaining them, and perhaps even benching them, or benching if you've got a defender for this next game against Tottenham would be a good idea.
My question with that, though, is if you're going to bench a defender of that much value, are you better off just transferring them out and using that money elsewhere?
Not if it's a hit.
Not if it's a hit, no.
Yeah, so this is the situation I'm in. If I transferred out a Liverpool asset, it would be for a hit. So I'm not convinced that's a good idea right now.
Especially, I guess, when the next game is Southampton at home. And that's a game where you're not going to be benching a Liverpool defensive asset for Southampton at home, regardless of how bad their form is at the moment. But I think, is it something like you've conceded first in 12 of your last 16 games or something like that, which is quite an impressive record.
It's unbelievable how we start games so terribly, and only after the opposition score, we come back into it. So it's really, really been very poor from us over the last couple of weeks or so. Look, we've spoken about Liverpool to death. Leeds, they looked up for it, but I'm still not keen on from an FPL standpoint. The next 2 games for Leeds are Bournemouth at home, but then Tottenham away. So maybe as a 1-week punt, you go for Bamford if you want to be a bit fruity. But or even Rodrigo perhaps is back on the table.
I don't know if I like either of them, to be honest with you. Like I say, it would only be a 1-week punt. Bournemouth looks a lot better against Spurs at the weekend, which I don't know if that says more about Bournemouth or Spurs at the moment, to be honest with you. But I don't think it's worth it for the sake of 1-week punt. I don't trust any of them, really. Rodrigo obviously only got the goal because he was gifted it. And Bamford just looks so out of sorts at the moment. I can't really see him picking up any points. So I just wouldn't bother. They're a team as well that potentially post-World Cup, if they have a lot of players rested, potentially then. But this World Cup's just throwing up so many spares. No one knows what to expect in those first couple of weeks. Well, especially with it's straight into festive football and games turn around really quickly. So it's going to be so insanely quick. You've got to be thinking really quickly on your feet. People will be missing deadlines, I'm sure. It should be interesting, but I will be avoiding Leeds, at least for the pre-World Cup period.
Yeah, fair enough. let's talk about a really fun team that we both love owning, and I'll let you take the lead in this. Newcastle 4, Aston Villa 0. Callum, the truth Wilson with 2 goals and 2 assists, along with Almiron getting a goal and an assist, and Trippier getting the assist as well for Joe Linton's goal. Talk to me about Newcastle, because we both had Nick Pope all year. We both really enjoyed having him. We both had Trippier from quite early on, and that's done us both well. So you've just brought in Almiron to treble up.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's difficult because now you're thinking, how can you get Callum Wilson in as well? And is he making a late run for the England squad for this World Cup? Because probably in terms of in-form England strikers, he's the man at the moment. So
Tony and Wilson, are they competing for the same spot, do you think?
Potentially. You've also got to think, you know what Southgate likes. Calvert-Lewin's fit again. He's probably in the conversation. Ollie Watkins has obviously been in and around those England squads, so he's in the conversation. But, I mean, for me, I would take Wilson over any of those other strikers that isn't Harry Kane right now. So if it wasn't for already being trebled up, I'll be looking at ways of getting him in. And depending on what happens post-World Cup, obviously, we can look to use those transfers and maybe fix things around then. But that would obviously mean getting rid of Pope, who we all know is... well, like we said last week, Newcastle have got the best defensive record in the league at the moment. So there's no shame in doubling up on their defence. But Almiron looks class at the moment. Like, he's the player that we all hoped he would be when he came into the league. I said to you last week about watching him, and he was tearing it up in the MLS prior to his move, and it never really clicked for him. So it's good to see it come out because he does seem like a very good guy, a very nice guy. And honestly, I'm just happy to see Eddie Howe doing well as well, because he always seemed like a good coach. People had always written him off in terms of his ability to organise a team defensively, which he's shown now that he can do. And they're just firing. I was a little bit wary about them going into this game, not because of their form, but because Villa picked it up with a big win last week. New manager bounce. You never know how long that's going to last. And, well, it lasted one game.
Yeah. I think we'll come on to Villa in a minute, but everything you said about Newcastle was true. Thinking back to a year ago, I was one of the doubters of Eddie Howe, and I think you were as well.
Yeah.
Well, I remember us having discussions over it, but he has done magnificently. His work with Joe Linton, with Almiron, there's still enough of that Newcastle side that is the side that he initially took over. It still feels like Newcastle. It's not like they've just gone and bought 100 new players and made a completely new side out of it with all the money they've got. They've actually kept the bones of what they had before and just made it all better. So I mean, you can say off the pitch what you want about Newcastle as a club, and you can make the judgments there, but on the pitch, it's really delightful to see. I also think this side is going to be very scary in the new year once you've got St. Max properly back as well, because he's still the most fun player in the entire league. And Isaac as well as to come back into the side. I think there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Newcastle fan right now. And the last 2 fixtures, Southampton away and Chelsea at home. Yeah, Chelsea at home isn't great, but actually you'd probably back Newcastle against them at the moment. Looking at their opponents though, Aston Villa had the new manager bounce last week, then seems to have just capitulated against Newcastle. But the next game is at home. It's against Manchester United. I think home teams are definitely looking a lot better at the moment. What are your thoughts on Villa? Because I've got Eric Bailey. I keep doing that. Leon Bailey as my third sub. I would probably never play him, but that's where I am at the moment. What are your thoughts on Villa? If you've got them, are you holding? Are you selling? What's your gut on it?
I think if you've got Villa at the moment, you're holding, aren't you? Just because, like we keep saying, there's 2 weeks before this World Cup break with those transfers. So unless you're desperate to move them on, I'd hold on to them. Because let's be honest, the odds are you're going to either have Bailey, who is probably the most popular Villa asset at the moment, or potentially Ings or Watkins, I guess, which you could, but I don't think their ownership is for either of them is particularly high. So unless you're desperate to move off of them, obviously Unai Emery comes in, actually takes over today as of recording. So it's his first day in charge. So it'll be interesting to see how they line up and change things around, if at all. And one thing I did notice at the weekend, something to look forward to, is Luca Dean was back on the bench. So
No, I've played that game too many times. I'm not interested. Absolutely not. Let's move on to another game because I don't want to talk about Villa anymore. They're boring. Brighton 4, Chelsea 1. And we brought Kepper into our joint team, which I think summarises how our joint team's going this season. But what happened to Chelsea here? Because it was absolute. It wasn't even like Brighton were lucky. It was like a complete massacre.
Graham Potter got out Graham Pottered. It was like a great performance. Their energy was high. They were pressing high up the pitch. Chelsea did help them out a little bit. Kepa then got injured and went off at half time. I don't think he was the worst transfer into our joint team. He in terms of he got a couple of clean sheets for us. He picked up 8 points the week before, I think. So I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a terrible decision. I think 2 own goals, you can't really legislate for. I mean, that's just bad luck, really. But overall, Brighton were fantastic value for their win. Sanchez did make some good saves. There was a couple of misses. Pulisic missed basically an open goal when it came to him on the rebound. So, they had the chances. They were making things happen. But they just seem to be really lacking a bit of end products at the moment. Aubameyang's obviously come in and not really done much. Havertz with the only goal. He's got 2 in 2 one in the league and 1 in the Champions League. So he's finding his feet a little bit. Sterling has done nothing since he signed for them. And he's been deployed at a bit of a wing back in the last week or 2. So I don't know. I just don't know where you stand with Chelsea at the moment. I know they've got a lot better defensively under Potter, but I just still think from an FPL standpoint, I don't know where their points are coming from. There's no consistency there. So I'd be avoiding their assets at all costs at the moment.
Yeah, I think when we come back, their first 2 games are Bournemouth and Forest. So that's when you go into Chelsea. But the next 2, Arsenal and Newcastle, you're not going anywhere near them. Brighton are a bit more interesting because they've got Wolves away, then Aston Villa at home. 2 very, very tasty fixtures from 2 teams that really aren't on form at the moment. Trossard is just the bane of so many people's lives. I think he and Gross are both fantastic transfers in for these next 2 fixtures. No one else at Brighton I'd be looking at, but those 2 I think could be worth their salt.
I mean, yeah, they're always worth looking at. I still can't bring myself to do it because I've said so many times that I feel like I've already missed the boat on Trossard. And I know exactly what will happen if I bring him in. He'll blank twice, probably pick up a couple of yellow cards, and it'll be a waste of everyone's time. So if you're not me, bring him in. If you are me, which I am, obviously, I am avoiding it because I just don't think I feel like I've missed the boat already. They're 2 good fixtures, and it's like I said before with under De Zerbi, it seems a lot more frantic and a lot more manic, and their results could be anything, I feel, at the moment. So I just can't bring myself to do it. It's too painful for me.
Trossard could go full with Zaha on you, couldn't he?
I'm sure he will.
I think I'm in the same boat, really. I feel like I've missed the boat on both Gross and Trossard, so I just won't be bringing them in for this last little run. Looking at a couple of other teams with good fixtures then. We touched on them earlier. Manchester United having a 1-0 win at the weekend. You obviously are looking to get rid of Anthony, but Rashford looked very good in that game. I actually thought Ronaldo looked somewhat threatening, but there's something about Manchester United that I just don't think I'm quite getting along with and clicking with. I'd love to be excited to own Rashford, but it's just not there for me at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, Rashford is the one I'm looking at for this week. Ronaldo had a couple of things, but he didn't really impress me too much. I think defensively they looked a lot better. They dealt with crosses into the box very well. And Martinez and Dalot in particular, I think, defended really well. So not that I'm looking to bring in any other defensive assets, don't get me wrong, but Dalot did get a clean sheet and 3 bonus points. And their next 2 fixtures are quite good. So I wouldn't be against if people were wanting to bring a United defender in. Dalot is your man. But the player that probably won them the 3 points in the end was David De Gea. Early in the week, Spain announced their 55-man shortlist for the World Cup squad, which included 5 goalkeepers, and none of them are David De Gea, which shows how far he's fallen in the eyes of the Spanish sort of hierarchy. But he made a couple of very good saves, including one right at the death from Declan Rice, who was curling one towards the top corner. And if it wasn't for him, then West Ham would have come away with a point. And to be honest with you, I think we deserved to come away with a point from that game. We made enough happen. Fabianski only actually made 2 saves, which goes to show that they weren't really pushing and testing us too much. We were a bit unlucky to only come away from that game with nothing. But I think Rashford's the man. He took his goal very well. His 100th goal for Manchester United, leapt at the back post like a salmon, a bit Ronaldo-esque, actually.
Yeah. It reminded me of when Mitrovic scored that goal against Trent in game week 1. It was very similar to that. But from a West Ham perspective, we've got 2 home games coming up, 2 quite nice home games. I have Keira at right back, and I actually think he played well watching the game. So I'm going to be keeping him for the last 2 fixtures. Is there anyone that we should be considering on an FPL standpoint? Is Scamacca worth considering? Is Bowen worth considering? What do you think as a West Ham fan? You're closer to this than I am.
I think they're worth considering these last 2 fixtures if you're going for a pump for 2 game weeks. Probably got 2, like, of the teams in the league, probably one of the best fixture rankings just for these 2 game weeks. 2 home games against mid-table-ish sides. So there's no reason not to look at them. I still really like Scamacca. I think he's a great player. The thing we've been missing these last few weeks is Lucas Paqueta, who's been injured. He could be back for this weekend. So if he comes back in, that will be a big boost because him and Scamacca seem to link up really well. It's like they've been playing together for years, but they've only actually been together for a couple of months. Keira getting down that right-hand side looked a little bit dangerous at times going forward. He was a bit static for Rashford's jump for that goal. He didn't even really get off the ground. So he's for me at the moment, is a little bit of a mystery. Like, you don't know what you're going to get with him. There was a reason that PSG let him go quite cheap. But he is flexible. He plays at centre-half. He plays at right-back. So you got that with him at least. I think, your main options are Bowen and Scamacca. Paqueta coming back from injury, you don't really know what you're going to get, so you can't really throw him straight into the team. Why not put Declan Rice in there? Go on, do it, I dare you.
I'm absolutely not ever bringing Declan Rice in for FPL. I agree with all of that. I don't know. I think being on penalties, Jared Bowen just feels like he could be a really nice differential for these 2. But that's maybe
but he might not be on penalties now as well. Having missed the one against Liverpool, we've had 2 penalties since then, and he hasn't taken either of them. I don't know if he was on the pitch. I don't know if he was on the pitch for. Oh no, he'd already. No, yeah, he won the penalty against Bournemouth, and Ben Rama took it.
Oh, okay, maybe not. Maybe Ben Rama's Ben Rama looked really good against Man United. He was your best player by far.
He's been our most consistent player this season for me. He hasn't had the big returns in terms of goals or assists, but creativity and spark and liveliness and everything like that, he has been our probably most consistent player.
Okay, fair enough. One more team I really want to speak about is Arsenal, because the 5-0 win at the weekend over Forest. If you haven't got Martinelli and had him from game week 1, you're a bit of an idiot. As far as I'm concerned, because he's been fantastic for all of us in FPL. 8 points again this week. I'm going to be moving Saka out. There's a lot of people in Arsenal defence. I probably wouldn't have them with 2 away games going on. I heard it was quite funny. A couple of Arsenal fans in the stands actually wishing each other Merry Christmas and giving holiday greetings to each other because it's the last home game they'll play. So they won't be seeing each other again, but they won't be playing at home until after Christmas this year, which I thought was quite amusing. But yeah, from an Arsenal standpoint, I'll keep Martinelli, I'll hold him, but then I'm looking to move out Saka for a Man City asset, given how beautiful their 2 fixtures look. What are your thoughts on Arsenal? Where are you with them at the moment?
Well, I'm currently just on Martinelli. So obviously he's staying. I moved Jesus out a little while ago now, and he hasn't actually scored since then, I don't think, but he has obviously picked up 2 assists at the weekend. So there's not too much concern around him at the moment, but you could potentially be looking at moving away from that if you wanted to. But other than that, I mean, or I will say, Tom, Ødegaard got a goal, 2 bonus points.
I mean, I love Ødegaard as a player. He's a wonderful footballer. As an FPL asset, the problem is there are better ones at his price point. So that's why, and considering the next 2 fixtures are away as well, like one of them being at Chelsea, I'm just not hugely keen on them. of all the teams, then there's no one else really I'd recommend investing in. So I think worth skipping over the rest of them, because in the next week or so we'll be having our first England squad. 3 weeks to the World Cup. Are you excited?
It's hard, and we've spoken about this a bit before. It feels really weird at the moment because normally you have that sort of month break of football before you really can get into World Cup fever. So it just feels like, with obviously football still happening and it's constant and week in, week out, it's almost like it's creeping up on, it's coming. And actually, it's like you say, it's less than 3 weeks now until it gets going, less than 3 weeks till England's first game. So it really is creeping up on us fast. The excitement doesn't quite feel like it's there. It feels like the political undertones of everything with Qatar and everything that's going on, and LGBT rights for people wanting to go to the tournament. There's just so much of that undercurrent that it feels like people aren't really as excited as they usually would be. Yeah. And rightly so. I mean, we could speak ad nauseum about how much of a disgrace it is that Qatar got the tournament in the first place, and how the deaths of migrant workers and the treatment of LGBT people in the country. I mean, for the most part, we're going to have to avoid that on this podcast. We're a fantasy football podcast, but I think you can all guess how we feel about the situation. So, but from a footballing standpoint, I'm starting to get excited a little bit now. It is very close. We're getting the first sort of looks at an England squad in the next week or two. So it will be interesting to see what Southgate goes with. We had a little chat in a group chat yesterday. We're talking about potential starting 11s for that England first game against Iran. All I know is that England first game has got written all over it 1-0 Harry Kane 88th minute penalty or something like that.
Yeah, or actually like a Mason Mount scrappy goal. There's something there, I think. If we were to pick, let's try and do an England starting 11 between us, because I think that could be quite fun, and it'll be interesting to see how close it is to what Southgate lines up. I think we agreed. We think we know what Southgate will line up with, in terms of most likely to have Pickford and then Trippier, Maguire, Stones, and Shaw along the back, with midfield three, then a front three of probably Sterling, Kane, and I guess Foden, but I'm not sure. And midfield three probably being Rice, maybe Bellingham, perhaps. I'm not sure.
I think Bellingham's almost guaranteed. The way he's been playing for Dortmund this season, and obviously the injury to Phillips, I think that means he's pretty much nailed on to start alongside Rice now.
I think we have to have him starting. So if we were to do an England 11, I would actually advocate that we should be doing 5 at the back, on the basis that our centre-backs aren't good enough to play in the 2, and our wing-backs are fantastic. So we should be utilising their creativity and ability to get forward. What do you think? Would you be doing 4 or 5 at the back if you were doing an England 11?
I think especially in the group stages, I think 5 at the back is fine. You get you see, and this really was highlighted to me when I was watching City play Leicester on Saturday. The way they play with the back line, and you get Stones basically steps into centre midfield. So if England went for that sort of back 5, especially in the group stages where you're expecting us to dominate possession against these opponents, there's no reason you can't do that. You play with your back 5. You get your wing backs up high. Stones can step into that middle. Rice can also drop and cover if need be, if anything goes on. So I think it works out quite well. You don't need the extra man in the midfield necessarily, because you're expected to dominate the ball, and then Stones can fill that role anyway. So I think especially in those early stages, you can go with that back 5. It'd be interesting to see what he does as the tournament develops. We know he does like the back 5 as well for England. And like you say, with the wing backs we've got, there's no reason you can't do it because of the creativity that they provide going forward.
Yeah, totally agree. Question around Harry Maguire. Would you be starting him for England if you had the choice?
I don't see what else you can do, to be honest with you. I think we're so lacking in options at the moment. He's obviously got the trust of Southgate. Other than
his calamity, though.
Yeah, he is. He is a calamity waiting to happen. Other than that, but then again, in general, he's done well for England for the most part. He had a bad game against Hungary over the summer in that fixture that in that group of fixtures that nobody cared about because the league had just finished and all the players just wanted to go on holiday.
That didn't count. Sorry, I love bashing on Harry Maguire, but that didn't count at all. Even you had Kevin De Bruyne coming out and saying these fixtures are bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. So I just don't feel like there's anyone else really knocking on the door. Obviously, Tomori, people have clamoured for him.
He can't now. Too late.
Yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? So I just don't see where else you can go in terms of another central defender.
I guess there's an argument this season to have John Stones there. Obviously, he should be first choice. But then Ben White has been playing well. You'd argue probably Eric Dyer has been playing very well as well. So I think they're the three I would prefer to go with. I think Maguire will get the nod, but I don't think that's the right call from an England standpoint. Then again, what do I know? But I think Ben White deserves the place there, given how well he's been playing this season.
Yeah, it's not a bad shout. I think the most likely, if you go with that back three of centre halves, provided he's fit, Walker will be on the right hand side of that three.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And then it'll be Stones and Maguire, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think Eric Dyer should be in that sweeper role ahead of Maguire. But we'll have to wait and see with it. If it's a back four, I think he will go Stones and Maguire there. And they've played well together for England previously in the Euros. They played well together. So it's jury's out. Forwards, we mentioned about Callum Wilson, but potentially Marcus Rashford as well, making a late surge for it. What are your thoughts?
He'll definitely be in the squad now, I think. He was left out of the last squad, I believe, and the one before that. He was left out of the last squad with injury, actually. Apparently he was going to be in the squad, but got a knock late on in the week before the squad was announced. So I would imagine he comes back into the squad, definitely. And he gives us something else, which is pacing behind, which we don't really have amongst our other strikers. If you look at, obviously, Kane, he likes the ball into feet and he's a hold-up player and he can drop deep and spray balls. And what you want, if you've got someone like him, is someone like Rashford who can play out wide. Sterling would do the same job, but I don't think he should be in his starting 11 at the moment, despite his incredible record for England. I just don't feel like his output is even worse than it was been at City when people were saying he shouldn't be starting because he wasn't playing well for City. He's gone down another level since then.
But I know Sterling, just to interject there, that he was not playing for City, and when he was playing, he played badly. Then he went to the Euros and was our best player. He's got that in the bank for England, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it wouldn't surprise me. And I wouldn't be disappointed if he played, let's put it that way, because he does have a record of popping up with big goals for England in big games. And we saw that at the Euros. So, but I just think at the moment there are better options out there. So personally, for me, if everyone's fit, I would go Kane up front and Rashford and Saka on the wings.
Interesting. I really don't like it very much because I just don't think there's any England 11 I like without Phil Foden in one of those side spots.
You could have Foden in the 10.
I don't think Foden has played in the 10. I don't think he's good enough to play in the 10, but I think he's the best option as a winger for us. Interesting. So as an England fan, and you're unbiased on this, Trent Alexander-Arnold is our most talented player, bar none. What do you do about him?
Because he's not our most talented player.
Maybe Foden, but
Foden's in there. I put Foden ahead of him.
Okay, but I think Trent's our best or our most talented player, in my opinion. I think you can argue Foden, but I still think Trent has achieved more and is a better footballer than anyone else. However, he's not been having a good season at all. What do you do with a player like Trent if you're Southgate?
What do you do with a problem like Maria? I think, and we've got to bear in mind here, obviously there are injuries going around as well. So Reece James is injured, so you've got to sort of almost exclude him from the conversation at the moment. It's really difficult with what to do with him. I personally, at the moment, think if you're going to play a back five, and especially against the teams in the group stages, Trent is probably the man to go with. If you're playing a back four, and especially against the teams as you get deeper into the tournament, Kieran Trippier is your man to go with because he's better defensively in current form, and he still offers you good things going forward, and he's good with set pieces. So it depends on the quality of the opposition, and what stage you're at the tournament and obviously what formation you play. So he's in that squad for me. There's no doubt about that. And the thing is, Southgate has always made an example of Trent. It's almost as though he doesn't like him for one reason or another. Even when he was playing at his absolute best for Liverpool, he was always lower down the pecking order. He likes Trippier. He knows what he gets from him. Obviously, there's so many other options with James, with Walker, who can play there as well. So we do have this plethora of talent at right back at England, which is sort of a detriment to some of our players. But yeah, that's my opinion on Trent.
I think I agree with you. With Southgate, it's very weird with Trent. Like, even when Trent was clearly the best right back in the world for several years, Southgate was not playing him for England. It was utterly ridiculous. Now, I think against the stronger opposition, Trent would be in the firing line. So unless you're playing a back five, I would probably play Trippier there instead. But it's a very, very difficult one. I don't think there's any scenario where you play Reece James over Trent, to be honest. I think defensively, he's just as poor. So offensively, just not almost as good, but I think defensively just as poor. And I think that's really not spoken about enough. But I think Trippier is the man to go with for the big games and the big teams. Really interested to see whether he takes him or not, though, because as you said, Southgate loves making an example out of young 22-year-old.
My question to you then, obviously we'll talk a little bit more in depth about the World Cup as it approaches. For you, what should England be aiming for as an absolute minimum in this tournament?
So if you look at all of the teams playing, are England in the top two sides on paper? I would say no. Are we in the top four sides on paper? Maybe. So on that basis, semi-finals. Are we in the top eight? Definitely. So I'd say quarterfinals as an absolute bare minimum. That being said, when the World Cup starts, I'll accept nothing but England winning.
It's coming home.
It's coming home. But I think if we're looking logically on paper, quarterfinals is fine, semi-finals is good. Now, if we run up against, I don't know, France or Portugal in round of 32 or round of 16, we're probably in a bit of trouble. But I think we are good enough to at least, in my opinion, get to the semi-finals. What's your perspective on it?
I think, it's a difficult one because obviously a lot's changed in the last 4 years for every team. Got new players coming and going. We made the semi-finals 4 years ago, so anything less than that feels like a backward step. I know we had a decent run in that tournament and we didn't really play any big teams. So that's got to be sort of weighted against the fact that that's where we got to. So it's very difficult. Quarterfinal. If we don't make the quarterfinal, Southgate's gone. There's no doubt about that. Semi-finals should be the target. Anything, if you get to the semi-finals again, we're still going in the right direction. I think other teams have gotten better as well. So if we make the semi-finals, I'll be very happy.
On paper, because we're far enough away that we can think logically about this, who do you think is going to win the World Cup, excluding England?
Well, no one, because it's going to be England.
If you had to pick one team and it's not going to be England, this is why I'm asking you now, because there's no way you're not going to pick England closer to the time. But if you had to pick one team, who do you think could end up winning it? This is your early prediction.
It's really tough, isn't it? Because obviously France come in as defending champions and they have got a good side, but there's a lot of turmoil around personal issues amongst the France squad, let's put it that way. But I do think they're in with a good shout. You can never really write Brazil out of it.
Favourites, Brazil are.
They are the bookies' favourites at the moment. So, but you feel like Brazil were always just one thing away from an absolute shambles. And you feel like they're really heavily reliant on Neymar because he is their talisman. And I feel like defensively they're decent, but they can be gotten at. I'd probably be back in France.
Yeah, right. I would probably be saying the same. Spain look good again as well. They're fifth favourites. And I guess you can never write off Germany, but they're not the side they were. They're probably the worst German. I mean, we said it when England beat them a few years ago. This is probably the worst German side we're seeing in a long, long time.
The other one is always Belgium. They're always, because you look at their squad and you go, that's an amazing squad, but they just never seem to have enough.
They just don't have enough in the big games. Belgium are behind the Netherlands and behind Portugal in the bookies. So I just don't think Belgium are that. Yeah, for me, it's got to be France. Looking at their squad, I think Brazil, on paper, are very good, but you get an organised or a good quality team against them. I'd fancy us against Brazil. To be honest, I'd fancy France against them. I'd fancy Germany against them. I just think Brazil can really be gotten at. I think Neymar can easily be distracted and be easily exploited, as he was when Liverpool destroyed Barca a few years ago in the greatest comeback of all time. Yeah, for me, it's France, then maybe Spain as second.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad shout. I just know if we came up against Brazil, Richarlison would shithouse his way to a hat-trick or something.
I don't think Richarlison starts for Brazil. No, I mean, he would for that game, maybe. Argentina are third favourites.
Yeah, I know they're always going to be there or thereabouts, aren't they? They have got a decent squad, but I don't know. I feel like they always just come up short. Messi's going to be that player that will never win a World Cup. This is his last chance, so he's obviously going to be throwing everything at it to try and, because obviously if anyone deserves to have won a World Cup, it is Lionel Messi.
Yeah, agreed, but I don't think he's going to do it this year. Cool, exciting stuff. Well, look, guys, we're going to be back for an earlier podcast next week. We'll probably record Sunday evening as I'm buggering off on my honeymoon 2.5 years later on Monday morning first thing.
It's about damn time.
I know, right? I'm not even excited yet because it's been postponed so much. I'm still expecting something to go wrong. But with all luck, I will be buggering off. But we'll record Sunday evening, so you won't be missing out. You can find us on Twitter, though, guys, @BigAtTheBack. Come and chat to us.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit more active on there again. So come and get involved with the conversation. It's obviously really down into wind down time before this World Cup. Obviously, Tom's going away, so we'll try and get that out as soon as we can next week. Unfortunately, we do have to have one, he said. I would have just liked to have had a week of not having to talk to him. But yeah, come and get in touch with us. Obviously, you can see both of our handles as well. I'm at Higgins92, Tom's at TomMadding92. But as we keep saying, take our advice and do the opposite.
Exactly. So make sure you are buying Aston Villa. Have a great week, guys, and we'll speak to you all on Sunday.